Okay, perfect. All right, everybody, thank you for joining. My name is Joshua Fox. I've been here at Ingram for about 5 years. I'm a technical account manager that focuses on Aruba. My entire 5 years here, I've been focusing on Aruba. So today I want to kind of talk to you guys about what Aruba has as its basic solutions. Let's move this recording thing out of there. There we go. That's a little bit distracting. Anyways, I'm going to be talking to you guys about the solutions that Aruba has to offer. Now, this is going to be a mile-high view. We're just going to kind of go over everything solution-wise that we have. And from there, I'd like you guys to just kind of keep in mind what you like. And in the future, we can dive a little bit deeper on any of the subjects that we cover today. All right, so for our agenda, the first thing that we're going to be talking about is why Aruba. We want to dive a little bit into what Aruba has to offer and why we're a little bit different than anybody else out there. From there, we'll talk about our small home and office solutions. We'll move into our enterprise and SMB solutions. From there, we'll talk a little bit about what we have in terms of management and security. And lastly, we'll talk about our analytics and wayfinding solutions. All right, so let's just go over a brief history of Aruba here. It was founded in 2002 with the mindset that we want to make wireless simple. At the time, wired networks were extremely difficult to handle. They still can be difficult to handle, but the whole premise was to make it as simple as possible. And in fact, the name Aruba actually comes from that whole concept of making it simple. The quote that they have is, when you think about a network, it should be a place where you want to go, not a place you want to run from. What better place than Aruba? And so it actually is named after the island, just because they want everything to be simple. They want you to think of it as kind of that tropical resort instead of a headache or a pain to manage. So by 2006, just 4 years after they had actually been founded, they were already recognized as a market leader. From there, they actually started making some acquisitions, Avenda Systems and Airwave. Avenda ended up becoming ClearPath. Airwave became a on-premise management solution. And by 2013, they'd already changed that ClearPath into being recognized as a market leader in NAC. By 2015, they were acquired by HPE Networking. And when they were acquired, they actually kind of reverse acquired the HP Networking wired portfolio, and it actually became a lot stronger of a company. In our 2017, Introspect and NetSite came about, and in 2018, we actually acquired Cape, which is now Service Assurance, and we also started developing the SD-WAN product portfolio. So many of you are probably familiar with the Gartner Magic Quadrant. If you're not, it's basically an independent source that kind of rates how well a certain vendor is. Now, what you're looking at here is the wired and wireless access, Aruba being #1 here. And we were actually #1 in 2017. This is a 2018 graph. So that's 2 years in a row here. We've been a market leader for 13 years, and in the last 2 years, we're actually kind of the leader when it comes to terms of the actual technology. We're growing 2 to 4 times faster than the actual market, so every year there's more Aruba out there, and because of that, you're seeing a lot of support. If you're not familiar with Airheads, it's kind of a community-based support, and there's already 75,000 active participants that kind of help each other in terms of questions that might arise. It's kind of like a peer work group that kind of helps each other come up with whatever question might come out of any Aruba solution or situation that you've run into. Now, right here, I just want to show that 5 out of 6 of what are the things that Gartner actually looks at when they're making that magic quadrant, Aruba has come in #1. Now, last year, in 2017, it was all 6. This year, we weren't #1 in the LAN category. That's pretty much attributed to last year with the 8400s release. It was a pretty powerful release for kind of the on-prem or on-campus data center portfolio. This year, we didn't have that, and so we kind of fell out on the LAN. But anything else, we're pretty much #1 in. As you can see here, I won't read through each of those because we're a little short on time and I want to get through the rest of the solutions that we offer. But just take a look at that and realize that we are recognized as industry leaders in most of the categories that we could be graded upon. All right, so the first thing we're going to be covering here is the Office Connect switches and access points. These are going to be your small home and your small office type of solution. The OC20 is the premier access point that we have here in small home and small office, and this is going to be kind of looking at your 100 users and less type of environment. So think of that small home, the small office, maybe like a small retail or small doctor office, a place that might not have an IT staff or somebody that just wants somebody else to set it up and forget that it was ever set up there. The OC20 is managed from an Android or an Apple phone, so you just download and install the application on your phone and then you kind of manage it from there. I use this in my own house just because I want something that's simple to use and easy to manage, and let me tell you, it really is simple. It took me less than 3 minutes to set this up, and I do have a lot of power over what can be done in my house and what can't be done. So that just kind of covers the OC20 here. Let's kind of move on. So the OC20 is usually used with some of our Office Connect and small business switches. Now we have a full line of switches here, everything from unmanaged switches up to smart managed. There is no full CLI and there is no cloud managed in this space, but we do have a good amount of breadth. We have our 1400 series, the 1405, which is kind of a small 5-port desktop mounted switch. We have the 1420, which is going to be a small unmanaged plug and play kind of switch. The 1620 and 1820 have a little bit of an overlap. These are both smart managed layer 2 switches. The big difference is the 1820 starts to add some of your uplinks. So if you want to have some smart management, but you don't need to go higher than layer 2, these are probably the 2 switches you want to look at and just kind of differentiate them by the type of uplinks that they may have. Now 1920S is going to be your smart managed switch that also includes some static routing, so you get a little bit of extra feature there. And the really nice thing about this switch is it pairs really well with the OC20 that we looked at on the last slide. If you configure something on the OC20 using that mobile app, let's say you create a guest network, it will auto-configure the switch to create a VLAN for that guest network for you. So it integrates really well with the OC20 and is a great solution if you're looking to do that really small home or maybe small office and you're just putting a single switch and a single access point or maybe a few access points in there. Now the 1850 is a lot like the 1820. It's going to give you some 10 gig uplinks instead of your regular gigabit SFPs. It is going to be smart managed though, and then the 1950 is a lot like your 1920S. It does not integrate with the OC20 like the 1920S does. However, it does have some 10 gig on it, 10 gig uplinks, and there's also a small 10 gig port switch there. All right, let's move on to our bread and butter here, some of the mobile first products. You might hear mobile first or intelligent edge, and you may hear something like the enterprise wired and wireless. Those are all terms that kind of talk about the same access points and wired switches. So here I'd like to just kind of go over the different switches that, I'm sorry, not the different switches, the different access points that we have. We have all the way down from our small 207 series all the way up to our 340 up here. Now the 207 is kind of getting phased out by the 303. They're about the same price, but think of this as your very small density type of access point. Our 300 series here is going to be still small density access point. The 310 series is going to be where you jump into your medium density. Now the 320 and the 330 series were our high and very high density. However, the 340 series has all the features of the 330 series. However, it comes at a price point of the 320. So when you're looking at the 320, 330, and 340 series, the 340 starts to make a lot of sense. The 340 is going to be your very high density. It does have dual Ethernet ports on it to support failover, and that's also PoE failover. So it's very good for highly redundant situations as well as high density situations. In addition to these access points, we also have the 303P that's a little bit newer. It's actually a really interesting access point because you can put one out, power it, and then daisy chain another access point right off of it. So in those small environments where you might not be able to get a new run for every access point, you can daisy chain a couple of access points off of it and save yourself on some cabling. It's a nice new little access point there, and I'm really interested to see how far that goes. Now, everything in the 300 series is going to be 802.11 AC Wave 2. All of these access points also are going to support Bluetooth. So if you were using with another solution like Meridian, for example, which we'll go over today, then these access points all are going to have that additional Bluetooth right integrated inside of it. All right, now in addition to those guys, we actually have two more access points that are really recent. The 510 series is a new access point. It's the first 802.11ax access point. This access point would actually fall somewhere between the 310 and the 340. Performance-wise, it doesn't quite hit the 340. However, it does definitely do a lot better than the 310, and it's about $100 more than the 310 list price, so it's a pretty good option if you're looking to future-proof you. I will just throw out there that there aren't any 802.11ax clients as of today, but if you are getting brand new wireless, it's a really good option to look at because you know that you're purchasing what the standard is going to be. Other than the 510, we also have the 387. Now, this is Aruba's first in a long time. We used to have the MST200s, but those went away. This is the first dedicated bridge that we've actually had. It's a really interesting access point because it's not AX or AC. It's 802.11ad. It's using a 60 gigahertz radio to really put out some throughput. Up to 3.37 gigs, however, at about 400 meters, you're looking at about a full gig reliably. So you can do those quarter-mile bridges, which are the most common bridges out there, and really actually get good performance. These access points also have a little mechanized arm inside of them that kind of helps you to align the access points. Most people just kind of do it visually in the older bridges, and they kind of hope that they're getting the best. This will actually help you to auto-align to make the setup of the bridge just a little bit easier. It also has a 5 gigahertz radio in it for inclement weather. If you're familiar with the 60 gigahertz spectrum, you might know that rain or other inclement weather is very hard on that spectrum, so it will default back to the 5 gig if you run into, say, rain or snow or something of that nature. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Aruba's switching portfolio. So we have everything from Access all the way up to Core. You're looking at the 2530 and 2540 switches. If you're looking at Access, the 2540 gives you some 10 gig. The 2530 does not. These are both mainly layer 2, though the 2540 can do some RIP routing. You want to use these mostly in those layer 2 types of situations. The aggregation, you have 2930F and 2930M. There's a new 2930M that just dropped here recently that's actually going to support the 60 watts of PoE, and that's going to be for our new 802.11ax access points. They need more power, so as those come out, the 2930M with 60 watts of PoE might be a good way to go. Keep in mind that you are going to have to get the 2750 watt power supplies for those to get to that 60 watts per port, but if you need the extra power, it's a really good way to go. We've also recently released a nice multi-gig switch in that space. That doesn't go all the way up to 10 gig. That's going to be 2.5 and 5. But that's going to be right about what we need for the 802.11ax switches. Now, the big difference between the 2930F and M is the F is a fixed port switch and the M is a modular switch. So if you used to use something like the 2920, these two switches are the replacement to that one switch. Based on how you were using 2920s, if you needed the modular stacking, redundant power, those kinds of things, then you'll be looking at the 2930M. If you were just buying these and putting them in separate closets, the 2930F might be a better solution for you. It's fixed. You can't really add any ports onto it later. However, it is a little bit less expensive because of the fixed nature of the switch. Now, when it comes to aggregation, you're looking at the 3810 and the 5400R. The 3810 switch is going to kind of be a nice step up from the 2930M. There's some good options here. There is a 24 port up to 24 ports of SFP Plus you can put on a 3810, but you can also do gigabit and just have the additional routing protocols that you wouldn't have in a 2930M or F. We also have the 5400. This is going to be our chassis. It's going to give you a lot of flexibility. You can put different line cards in there and get different port counts based on what you need. There's all kinds of different ports that you can get, things like Smart Rate, SFP Plus, QSFP Plus, and so on. Now, after you jump out of the aggregation, you're really looking at our new data center portfolio. It's not 100% data center. What I would like to note on these is they're really approaching what you can do in a real data center. However, things like DCB or data center bridging and VXLAN aren't there yet. So if you have somebody that's doing something with DCB, they're doing a lot of storage and the lossless nature of that protocol is needed, then these guys are going to be a good option for you. I'm sorry, not going to be a good option for you. Also, if you have very hefty VM loads, these are also not going to be the best option. For that, you might want to look over to Flex Fabric, which I will not be covering today. However, in a lot of campus data centers and a lot of big data areas, we're seeing that these are a good way to go. Not everybody's doing large VM loads, and not everybody's using these specifically for that one storage application. So they're really good core switches for larger environments. Think like a university or something of that nature, or any environment where you just need those extra ports. We do see the 5400 sometimes kind of jump into that same space for the smaller environments that kind of have a data center that's actually just really small, more of just a distribution, if you will. So definitely kind of bleed over there, but you'll see the 5400, 8320, 8325, and 8400 all start to play more in our core switching area. All right, now I'm going to talk about some of the different ways that we can manage the products that I've talked about from a hardware perspective. And the first thing I really want to talk to you guys about is Aruba Instant. Now, for anybody that's not familiar with these are really a bread and butter of what Aruba can do and what makes Aruba so powerful. It's the foundation for many Aruba solutions. It's the first controllerless architecture that was really introduced to the market, and it's a pretty powerful one. It has a lot of features for something that has no controller in it. You can scale these out pretty high, too. Up to 128 IAPs, or instant access points, can be put in a cluster. That's pretty high up there, even when you're looking at some of the smaller controllers. One thing I will say is once you start to get to the 50 or so instant access points, it's a good idea maybe to look at a controller or maybe Aruba Central as an add-on, because those networks tend to have a little bit more complication to them. It doesn't always have to be the case. Sometimes you run into a building that's all concrete or something like that, and they just need the extra access points for coverage, but it's not really a complicated network. You can go up to 2,000 devices. We call that 1,000 users because we assume 2 users per device. But once you get up to that 1,000 user mark, it might be a good idea to start, again, looking at maybe a controller or Aruba Central. Now, in addition to being controllerless, it's going to give you most of the controller features that you might see with traditional controller environments. You're going to get built-in RF management. The big one here is the adaptive radio management, basically allowing your radios to make intelligent decisions on what channels they're using. You have client match, which basically takes information about the wireless network that you have and throws it into a proprietary algorithm and basically takes the best client and matches them to the best access point for that client. You get built-in edge security. There's a role-based firewall and whips directly on the access point. And you also get something called application RF, which is basically going to give you visibility into what applications people were using and when they were using those applications. It also has built-in resiliency. Whenever an access point goes down, there's a new access point elected as the leader, and it automatically just kind of keeps running. So it's built-in failover right inside of the access point. Now, one thing I'll mention about this, there's no additional licensing to get all of these features. Because of that, in that 1,000 user and less kind of environment, these instant access points really excel, and a lot of times we just actually go without controllers because of that. Now, if you're interested in how they work, it's actually super simple. You plug in an access point, you configure the first access point, it becomes a master, performs all the functions that it needs to, like firewall and controller functions. And then any access point that you add from that point forward will phone home to the initial master access point and grab its configuration. The whole process is relatively quick, takes about 5 minutes. You can go a little bit more in depth with the policies and so on that you actually set up, but to get yourself up and running is really quick with these instant access points, which is probably why they're so popular. All right, so after the instant access points, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about these controllers here. Now, the physical controllers range all the way down from something small, like a 16 access point controller, all the way up to something large, like a 7280. Now, when you look at these, you want to separate them. The 7200s would be your guys up here. You want to use those for large campuses for the most part. Those are the ones that are going to support the most access points. You can cluster these guys to support more access points. So if you need to go over 2,000 and that 7280 just doesn't do it by itself, you absolutely can. In addition to that, we also have the virtual controller down here, the VNC Tact. I know that's kind of categorized under the small branch, but I would like to point out that it can do 10, 50, 250, and 1,000 access points as the different VM sizes. And again, you can cluster those too. So you can cluster up to 6 of the 1,000 ones to get all the way up to 6,000 access points. So they're by no means small branch. So if you find that you want to be doing some virtualization, this is a really good way to go. Aruba does offer its firmware updates for free, so this is a good way to kind of purchase the controller once and never have to refresh. The 7030, 7024, and 7005 and 7008 series controllers tend to be used in the branch a lot in overarching controller environments where you might have something like Mobility Master acting as a master controller and have kind of a distributed type of architecture. They also work a lot with the SD-WAN solution, which we'll go over today. They don't always end up being a single site controller, and a lot of just that one controller type of need situation, the instant access points really excel. But if you need that extra granularity of control that Instant really doesn't offer, you have a very complex type of environment, these smaller 7000 series also will do well. All right, from here I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about Aruba Central. Aruba Central is going to be our cloud management. We can manage Aruba OS switches. That's going to be the 2500 series all the way up through the 5400 series. Those core 8300s use something called Aruba OS CX, so you can't manage them with Aruba Central today. You can also manage any instant access point that we've covered, and you can also manage controllers as branch gateways. We'll talk a little bit about that more when we talk about SD-WAN. Just note that when you make a controller into a branch gateway, it stops being a controller. So Aruba Central doesn't actually manage controllers from a WLAN perspective. Now, these are really great for managed service providers because Aruba Central allows you to basically manage lots of different customers' environments. They're also great for multi-site deployments, any situation where an OpEx model is preferred over a CapEx model. And they're also good for deployments that have limited IT staff. It's a relatively simple interface, and because it's all coming back to one centralized person, you tend to have a little bit less of a need to have basically IT staff at every location. Now, from a wireless perspective, Aruba Central is going to give you a little bit more than just the management. It's going to give you some guest Wi-Fi features, meaning you can do things like social media login. If somebody wants to log in with Facebook or Twitter, or you want somebody to like your business before they're able to log in, you can do custom captive portals, and you have a lot of control over how the guest network is going to be consumed, meaning I can say somebody can be on the guest network from X time to X time, maybe 9 to 5 is the only time my guest network is on. Or if you're on the guest network for an hour, I'm going to kick you off, maybe something like that for a library. A lot of good ways that you can kind of control who's using the guest network and who isn't, or when they're not. You also have something called Presence Analytics. This is for you to track engagement. It's great because you don't even need a device to connect in to be able to track that engagement. A person just walking by the access point is going to ping it, and then it's going to be able to understand that a person was there. So you can basically get a really good idea of who was coming in, how long they were in your WLAN. It's really popular with retail. As you might imagine, you might have a Nike store or something of that nature and a mall, and now you can see how many people are walking by your store, how many people actually came in. Really good way to track your engagement and know if you're doing the right thing or not. Lastly, we have something called connectivity analytics. Clarity, if you've heard of it, was another name for it, but it's basically predictive analytics that allows you to find out what's happening, what's going wrong in your network, or even what might go wrong in the future so that you can make a proactive change to your network to make sure that you're always giving the best wireless experience. So Airwave is kind of an on-prem. If you don't like the OpEx model of Central, Airwave is a really good alternative for you. Airwave is actually a little bit more powerful in some ways than Aruba Central. One of the big differentiators I would say about it is its multi-vendor management. The ability to manage, say, a Cisco, Juniper, Extreme, doesn't really matter. We'll manage other vendors' environments. So if you run into a situation where somebody is, I don't know, going through a merger, or they just have older switches or older equipment that they're not ready to refresh yet, this is a good way to kind of manage all of it under one console. You can do a lot of the same things that you could do with something like Aruba Central. You can monitor performance. You can see all the network devices that you have. You also have AppRF here where you can look and see what applications are being used. You can also visualize your entire RF environment. You basically can load a floor plan into Airwave and place the access points, and it'll kind of show you what your RF environment is actually looking at. There's a feature in here that gives you a lot of information about what wireless attacks might be going down. It's called Rapids, and that's really going to help you when you're creating your WIPs types of policies. There are also troubleshooting tools, custom reports and alerts here that you can actually put in. So if you're something you're looking to troubleshoot, or if you want an alert to come out for a specific event, you can set that up. And you can also set up certain types of reports that you want to look at in case there's something that you're trying to track or look at in your RF environment. It actually works really well with Instant, and there's a lot of companies out there that deploy Instant access points in clusters and then use Airwave to control it rather than going, say, with Instant access points in Aruba Central. This is going to be more of your CapEx type of model, and it's actually pretty inexpensive at $75 list for every Airwave license. Buying an Airwave license entitles you to the VM, so this is a really good way to set up a virtual management infrastructure and remote manage, monitor across many different sites. All right, so Mobility Master is a relatively new product here. This is going to give you centralized management of your controllers. It's going to provide you, it's basically going to replace the master controller architecture. Aruba used to use controllers to control other controllers, and this kind of gets rid of that and gives you a dedicated appliance to do that. You can manage not only just your controllers, but have controllers in other countries. That also used to be kind of a problem because controllers would have a country code, and now you're kind of independent of that, so you can kind of control across very vast distances. It gives you a feature called hitless failover. So basically, you can have controllers going and have one fail, and the next one kind of just picks up automatically. It's going to serve as your central licensing server, and it really allows you to do real-time upgrades as well. If you're doing a firmware update, something of that nature, and you don't want to bring off your entire network, you can go ahead and have Mobility Master in there and run the firmware update, and you won't even notice that the network was being updated. It does automatic user and access point load balancing, basically moving users to where they need to be, has automated RF management, and also has this feature called Air Match, which basically allows you to change the width of your channels, not just change a channel itself, but change the width. So think of something like an atrium or a cafeteria, where maybe in the beginning of the day you don't have too many people in the actual area, and then as the day kind of goes on, more and more people go. Well, maybe you have a larger channel to support larger amounts of bandwidth, and as the atrium or cafeteria starts to fill up, you can actually change those channels down for a more high-density type of channel management. So it's a pretty powerful feature. You also have your multi-tenancy, which is a pretty interesting feature that allows you to basically have the same controllers or access points in an environment, yet have different people manage them and use them like their own. This would be really something useful in something like a mall. To go back to that example, I might be using the same controllers and access points, but when somebody connects to an access point based on where they are, they will get that feel as if they're in that store. Also really good for leased environments. If you think about an office where you have a shared office space, well, now I can have the same controller and access point, but if I'm going to connect into an access point, I can get the credentials to get into the one that's for the place that I work for and not for the place that somebody who works in the same building and they're in a different company would work for. It also includes some northbound APIs, so it's able to intelligently talk up and down and share the information that it has. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into security here. One thing I'd like to talk to you guys about is ClearPass. ClearPass is going to be our network authentication solution. Now, ClearPass is pretty powerful. It's basically going to be extending our security out to the edge. We can profile devices with this thing by the type, the operating system, and then make intelligent decisions on what that device should be allowed to get to and what it's not allowed to get to. We can also store the identity of those devices and then share that with different security appliances or products so that they can make intelligent decisions based on the same information that we're gathering. I find that a lot of networks, people don't really know what's connecting, when it's connecting, and that can pose a real security risk. So this is going straight to the edge and making sure we know about everything that's connecting into our network, when it connected, and all the information about that device. In addition to doing the authentication and serving as that kind of edge security for coming onto our network, we do have some additional features. You can self-register devices, meaning that a person comes onto your network, they can register themselves. Takes a lot of the heat off of your IT. We can do posture assessment. We can ensure that that device is meeting certain security standards. Does it have an up-to-date operating system? Was it running a virus scan in a timely manner? Make sure that it meets a security standard before it comes onto your network is a powerful way to actually stop threats from being in your network when you start up. So that kind of covers a little bit of what ClearPass does. Now, I'd like to kind of show you here kind of some of the functionality of ClearPass and kind of just emphasize a little bit that this is the power of kind of securing at the edge. We can do a lot of different things like profile, authenticate, make sure that you have the correct certificate. Basically, we can say who you are for when you come onto the network, but we can also do a lot with the identity sources section, right? We can make sure that we are creating our policies based on the device or the health of the device, the user, where that device was when it connected. We can authenticate it back to an Active Directory, or again, we can do something with something like a PKI or pre-shared key infrastructure. We can do tokens as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we can take a user, authenticate them onto the network, and then basically know what their identity is and identify them or separate them based on who they are so that they have the correct actual access to the things that they should get to. So Introspect is a really interesting solution. I'm going to kind of talk about Introspect, and I want to tie that back into ClearPass. Introspect is a user and entity behavioral analytics engine. It's basically artificial intelligence. What this is going to do is set a baseline behavioral standard for what a device or a person is doing, and then when that person or device goes outside of that standard, we can say, hey, that's not okay. We shouldn't be doing that. So kind of an example here is you have the Sam fella, and he might be going and getting into different resources like Office 365, or maybe he's going up to a cloud application, or maybe he's just authenticating, right? And when you see Sam do something that he's not supposed to be doing, then we're going to get an alert. Oh, looks like my screen is frozen here. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Kind of lost my train of thought there. But coming back to it, maybe we have Sam here, and he's doing something that we realize isn't something that he should be doing. This is a great way to defend against zero-day threats. Most types of security out there are basically securing on a signature or a string of digits in whatever the malicious code is saying, hey, that's an identifier. We know that that's not going to be something we want. We also have sandboxes where we can throw code in there and try to make it blow up or do something so that we know that that's something that we don't want. Now, introspect doesn't do those two things. What introspect does is it monitors behavior and then says, hey, that's not the right behavior, and then we can take action based on that. That's powerful because now we're not looking at something that has to have been found. We're looking at what you're doing and why you're doing it so that we can catch it sooner in the process and we don't suffer as much from an attack or some kind of breach. So when you use ClearPass and Introspect together, you get the ability to do the discover and authorize portion. Is this device good? Is it something I trust before it comes onto the network? Once it's on the network, we can monitor and see exactly what it's doing. If it does something that we don't like, ClearPass can come back in and make real-time action on that device or that person or whoever it might be. We can quarantine, we can re-authenticate, we can do things like shut down the bandwidth that it has, or we can even blacklist it and make sure that it's not coming onto the network at all. So pretty powerful to kind of use those things together. ClearPass acting as your gatekeeper and Introspect kind of acting as your intelligence for the entire security solution. All right, so let's talk a little bit about SD-WAN. So SD-WAN is basically a really good way to extend policies that you might have put down at your LAN across the entire infrastructure that you might have. So if you have lots of remote sites, you're doing a lot of cloud applications, those kinds of things, SD-WAN really helps with that kind of infrastructure. A lot of times we find that people are creating different types of policies and then running every environment siloed from the rest. And that just kind of creates a big headache. What this is really allowing you to do is create one extensible policy that kind of pushes out from your head-end gateway across the entire infrastructure. We use the controllers, basically, we repurpose them to make them SD-WAN appliances. You'll have something like a 7200, might be a 7205, 7210, 40, or 80, or so on. We'll have that at a main data center, and then we'll be putting out branch gateways at all of the other locations. And then we just run that same policy across the entire organization. That allows us to do quality of service and keep the same quality of service that we have or the same things that we like about our LAN and keep it across the entire WAN. We can also tie this in with ClearPass and have the same security policy and authentication policy across, again, the entire extensible network, not just at one single site. Now, this is going to be managed with Aruba Central. So it's not today managed by anything like Airwave or any on-prem. So if you do go with something like SD-WAN, you're using Aruba Central. The typical solution for this would be access points, switches, and a branch gateway located at your remote sites. And then at your main data center or your main site, you might have a head-end gateway with ClearPass integrated in so that you can make sure that you're running your network access control alongside of your quality of service across the entire network. All right, let's move on to the tail end here. You guys might have heard about Cape Networks that got renamed into Aruba Service Assurance. Now, these guys are little sensors. They're basically a Linux box that you kind of put up in your site near your access points. And what they're really going to be doing is acting as a client so that you can do real testing to see how clients are actually faring in the wireless network that you've created. They're a great way to kind of keep your network honest, as things like Clarity and other types of analytics engines only have information from the network side. Really cool thing about these is they have an integrated modem inside of them so that if the network is down, you're still able to see what a client is seeing. You can see if that's just maybe it's a WAN problem, can you still get into internal resources, those kinds of things. You can do real-time testing for your applications. Wouldn't it be great to just do a phone call on something like this sensor and know that your VoIP network is working rather than thinking that it is, and then when somebody actually goes to make a call, they don't get the experience that they expected, and now they're opening up troubleshooting tickets for your IT staff. You can get automated alerts with these too. So if anything goes wrong, they can actually send like an automated text out to you. Hey, your network's down, or hey, you're experiencing something based on a threshold that you set up. Another beautiful thing about these is they're really not tied to Aruba network. You can use these anywhere. So in any situation where you might be managing somebody else's network or so on, you can kind of put these guys in there and use them as a way to make sure that that network is always up and running, and you don't really need to have a whole Aruba architecture in there to be able to do it. So Aruba Net Insight is another interesting solution that we have. This is another machine learning type of solution, and what it basically does is collects information about the environment that you put it into, and then takes that and puts it into a data repository. And from there, it's going to give you proactive information about what you need or what you should do to make your network perform more efficiently or to have better performance. It actually uses all the information of other people that are using Net Insight to kind of put together those recommendations. So if it sees that you have a similar network to somebody else, it can actually look at that, compare it to what that other person has, and then kind of make good judgment or good actionable items that you should do to make your network a little bit better. It doesn't take any information that would be, say, like user information or anything like that. What it's taking is configuration information, and it's also taking information on the performance that you're seeing, how much data is going over X line, and so on. That's how it's making its decisions about what you should do to make your network a little bit better. All right, guys, we're going to cover one more thing here, and that's going to be Aruba Meridian. Now, Meridian here is going to be a wayfinding indoor GPS style type of solution. It's pretty interesting because you can basically have people download the Meridian app that you either create or integrate with an existing app that you have, and then that person can get directions onto the places that they're looking to go. I've seen this used in some interesting ways. There's a piece of this that allows you to have something called a push notification, sends out a notification when somebody comes into proximity of another beacon or something that you have set up. So one of the examples that I saw was a zoo was using this, and whenever a person wanted to walk up to the animals, it would give them like a little pet personal. So there would be like Lucy the gorilla, and it would tell you about her handlers and what she likes and so on, and how long she's been here with that zoo. And you could kind of get all of that information right there when you walked up to her exhibit. And the great thing is a person that didn't know how to get there, they could basically find their way there by just using a Google Map style direction to find Lucy. Now, you can also do asset tracking with these. There's beacons that you can put onto devices, and if they leave a certain proximity, you'll know about it. In addition to doing asset tracking, wayfinding, and push notifications, you also get good analytics for your environment. So you know who was where and when they were there. And you know this with a lot more accuracy than you do with the analytics that you might see from Wi-Fi, because Bluetooth can pinpoint to a much more accurate degree. Now, I mentioned this before, but you can tie Meridian to an existing application that you might already be using. So if somebody already uses an application in their store or their location, you can tie it right into that and just give it that location finding in addition to whatever it was that their application was actually providing. If you don't have an actual application there, then you can go ahead and build one yourself to use in that environment. All right, guys, that really covers it. Kind of went through everything there a little fast, just kind of giving you the mile-high overview. From here, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you guys might have. If anybody has a question, go ahead and feel free to call it out, and we will go ahead and answer that for you. All right, I'm not really hearing any questions. I'll go ahead and end the recording, but stay online here. If anybody has a question, just let me know.